In a forgotten valley beneath the Arabian sun, a small band of men prepared to face an army that outnumbered them 3-1. They had no armor, no cavalry, no worldly power to boast of, only faith. On the 17th of Ramadan, in the second year after Hijrah, 313 believers stood in the sands of Badr, their hearts steady, their bodies trembling, their souls ready to meet destiny. Across the valley, 1,000 warriors from Mecca sharpened their blades, confident that this day would erase the name of Muhammad forever. But what they did not know was that the unseen world had already taken sides. As the sun began to rise, angels descended upon the desert wind, unseen, unstoppable, commanded by the Lord of the worlds. This is the story of faith against pride, of courage against fear, of men who walked into the impossible and witnessed a miracle written in the heavens. You're listening to 60 Minutes of Islam. The day angels descended the Battle of Badr. In the darkness of a Meccan night, Abu Sufyan bolted upright from his sleep, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face despite the cool desert air. The nightmare had been so vivid, so terrifyingly real, that he could still see it behind his closed eyelids. A caravan swallowed by darkness, blood mixing with sand, the screams of Quraysh nobles echoing across empty dunes. His hands trembled as he reached for water. This was no ordinary dream. In Arabia, dreams were omens, messages from the unseen world. And this one spoke of disaster. Abu Sufyan commanded the greatest trade caravan in Arabian history, 1,000 camels loaded with 50,000 gold dinars worth of Syrian goods, guarded by only 40 men. 4 weeks they had traveled the treacherous route back to Mecca, and now they approached the most dangerous stretch, the lands near Medina where Muhammad and his followers had established themselves. As dawn broke, Abu Sufyan made a decision that would alter history. He called his most trusted scout. Damn, his voice was urgent, barely controlled. Ride to Mecca. Tell them the caravan is in danger. Tell them Muhammad's men are coming for our wealth. Tell them, if they don't come, everything we've built will be destroyed. Damn mounted his camel and rode with the desperation of a man carrying the fate of a nation. 3 days of relentless riding brought Damn to the gates of Mecca. What he did next would be remembered forever. He cut his camel's nose until blood poured down its face. He tore his own shirt and flipped his saddle backward, the ancient Arabian signal of catastrophic emergency. Covered in dust and blood, he rode into the heart of Mecca screaming at the top of his lungs. O Quraysh, your caravan, your property, Abu Sufyan and your wealth from Syria. Muhammad and his companions are ambushing it. I do not think you will reach it in time. Help. The effect was instantaneous. The marketplace exploded into chaos. Men abandoned their shops. Women rushed from their homes. Children scattered. And the war drums, those drums that had been silent for years, began to thunder through the stone streets of Mecca. In his grand house, Abu Jahl smiled with savage satisfaction. His eyes gleamed with a hunger that had been building for years. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. This is our chance, he declared to the gathering chiefs, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated rage. We will not just save the caravan. We will march to Badr with such a force that all of Arabia will tremble. We will slaughter Muhammad and his followers. We will end this problem forever. The response shook the foundations of Mecca. Within hours, an army of over 1,000 warriors was being assembled, the largest military force Quraysh had ever fielded. 300 horses. 600 suits of gleaming armor. Enough provisions for a prolonged campaign. Every noble house pledged men and weapons. But in one courtyard, a wealthy merchant named Umayyah bin Khalaf stood frozen, his face ashen. I will not go, he announced to his companions, his voice barely steady. Minutes later, Abu Jahl appeared at his door, fury radiating from every pore. You refuse to fight for Quraysh? I have a bad feeling about this, Umayyah replied. Abu Jahl's laugh was cold, mocking, venomous. You, one of the wealthiest men in Mecca, afraid? What will people say? They will call you a coward. They will say you sympathize with Muhammad. The words struck like arrows. In Arabian society, honor was more valuable than life itself. Umayyah felt the weight of judgment crushing down on him. Fine, he finally whispered, his voice hollow as a tomb. I will go. As he prepared his weapons, a terrible foreboding settled in his heart. It felt like preparing for his own funeral. To understand Badr, we must first understand the years of blood and tears that led to it. For 13 years in Mecca, the Muslims had endured persecution that would break most people's spirits. It wasn't just disagreement or verbal abuse, It was systematic, brutal oppression designed to crush Islam before it could take root. Bilal, the Ethiopian slave, was dragged into the scorching desert at noon. His master, Umayyah bin Khalaf, placed a massive boulder on his chest and left him to bake under the merciless sun. "Renounce Muhammad or die here," Umayyah would scream. But Bilal, despite the unimaginable agony, would respond with one word over and over, "Ahad, Ahad," meaning one, affirming the oneness of Allah. Sumayya bint Kayat, an elderly woman who had accepted Islam, was tortured in public. Abu Jahl personally killed her with a spear thrust, making her the first martyr of Islam. Her husband Yasser was tortured to death. Their son Ammar was forced to watch. The Prophet Muhammad himself was not spared. Intestines were thrown on his back while he prayed. Trash was dumped on him. He was strangled until his eyes bulged. A Quraysh noble tried to smash his head with a rock while he prostrated. Young men who accepted Islam were disowned by their families, stripped of their inheritance and expelled from their homes. Business partnerships were dissolved. Social ties were severed. The Muslims became outcasts in their own city. The migration. After 13 years of this torment, Allah gave permission for the Muslims to migrate to Medina, a city 300 kilometers to the north, where tribes had pledged to protect them. But migration meant abandoning everything. The Muslims of Mecca left behind their homes, their businesses, their wealth. They arrived in Medina as refugees with nothing but their faith. The Quraysh didn't just let them go. They seized all the property the Muslims had left behind: homes, shops, merchandise, savings. Wealth accumulated over generations was confiscated and distributed among the Quraysh elite. The rising tensions. In Medina, the Muslims struggled to rebuild their lives. The Ansar, the Muslim residents of Medina, welcomed them generously, sharing homes, businesses, and resources. But the economic situation was difficult. Meanwhile, the Quraysh continued their massive trade caravans through routes that passed near Medina. These caravans represented the economic lifeblood of Mecca, millions of dinars flowing between Syria and Arabia. The Prophet received divine permission to intercept these caravans. This wasn't random banditry, it was justice. The Muslims were recovering a fraction of the wealth that had been stolen from them. Every dinar in those caravans included money that rightfully belonged to the Muslim refugees. Several small expeditions were sent out. Some caravans were successfully intercepted. Others evaded the Muslims. Word spread throughout Arabia that the trade routes were no longer safe. For the Quraysh, this was intolerable. Their pride was wounded. Their economic dominance was threatened. But more than that, the very existence of the Muslim community in Medina was an insult to everything Quraysh represented. Abu Sufyan's caravan. Then came the biggest caravan of all. Abu Sufyan was returning from Syria with 1,000 camels loaded with goods worth 50,000 gold dinars, equivalent to millions in modern currency. It was the largest caravan in living memory, and it belonged to virtually every wealthy family in Mecca. His scouts brought alarming news. The Muslims know about the caravan. They're planning an interception. Abu Sufyan was a shrewd merchant, not a warrior. He diverted the caravan to a safer coastal route and sent his desperate message to Mecca. The gathering storm. When Damdam arrived in Mecca with his blood-soaked warning, the response was overwhelming. But it wasn't just about saving the caravan anymore. Abu Jahl saw something bigger, an opportunity to destroy Islam permanently. "We will march with 1,000 men," he declared. "We will slaughter Muhammad and his followers at Badr. We will make such an example of them that no one will ever dare challenge Quraysh again." The army that assembled was magnificent and terrifying. Over 1,000 warriors. 300 horses, an enormous cavalry force for that era. 600 suits of armor. The finest weapons money could buy. Provisions for a campaign. Musicians and singing girls to celebrate the expected victory. Every major clan of Quraysh sent their best warriors. This was the flower of Arabian nobility, marching to crush what they saw as a rebellion of slaves and outcasts. As they prepared to march, a messenger arrived. "Abu Sufyan's caravan has taken the coastal route. It's safe now." Many wanted to turn back. The mission was accomplished, the caravan was safe. But Abu Jahl refused. "By Allah, we will not turn back until we reach Badr. We will stay there 3 days. We will slaughter camels, we will feast, we will drink wine, and the singing girls will play for us. All of Arabia will hear of our power and will fear us forever." Some clans withdrew. The Banu Zura decided the fight was unnecessary and returned home. But over 900 warriors continued their march toward Badr, driven by pride, rage, and the desire to end the Islamic movement forever. Moral reflection. Every beginning of truth is tested with fear. The Muslims fled persecution, lost everything and rebuilt from nothing. Now their enemies marched with overwhelming force to finish what torture had failed to accomplish. But in that moment of maximum danger, something was about to happen that would prove, truth doesn't need numbers, it needs sincerity. In Medina, the news arrived like a thunderclap. Intelligence reached the Prophet. Abu Sufyan's massive caravan was returning from Syria, passing within striking distance. It represented an unprecedented opportunity and an unprecedented risk. The Prophet called his companions to the mosque. The atmosphere was electric with tension and uncertainty. Some 300 men gathered, a mixture of Muhajirin, Meccan refugees, and Ansar, Madinan Muslims. The Prophet stood before them, his face calm but serious. His voice carried across the assembled believers. "O people, Allah has promised you one of the two, either the caravan or the army. The caravan of Abu Sufyan is approaching. But Quraysh has also sent an army to protect it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. An army? They had expected to intercept a lightly guarded caravan, not face a military force. The Prophet continued, "Advise me, O people." Abu Bakr, the closest companion, stood immediately. His voice was firm, filled with emotion. "O Messenger of Allah, we hear and we obey. We will follow you wherever you command. By Allah, if you ordered us to plunge into the sea, we would do so." The Prophet nodded with approval. "May Allah reward you, Abu Bakr." Then Umar ibn al-Khattab rose, his powerful voice resonating. "O Messenger of Allah, proceed with the blessing of Allah. We are with you. By Allah, we will not say to you what the children of Israel said to Moses, 'Go, you and your Lord, and fight.' Indeed, we are remaining right here. Rather we say, 'Go, you and your Lord, and fight.' Indeed, we are fighting alongside you." The Prophet's face lit up with joy at these words. But then he repeated, "Advise me, O people." Some companions looked confused. Abu Bakr had spoken. Umar had spoken. What more was needed? Then the Prophet glanced specifically toward the Ansar, the Muslims of Medina. Understanding dawned. The treaty between the Prophet and the Ansar had specified that they would defend Medina from attack. But this expedition was different. This was marching out to meet the enemy. The Prophet wanted to ensure the Ansar were willing, that he wasn't forcing them into a commitment they hadn't agreed to. Sa'd ibn Muadh, chief of the Aws tribe of the Ansar, rose to his feet. He was a tall, dignified man respected by all. His voice carried the weight of leadership and the depth of conviction. "O Messenger of Allah, perhaps you mean us, the Ansar?" The Prophet nodded. Sa'd's next words would become legendary, recited by Muslims for 14 centuries. "O Messenger of Allah, we have believed in you. We have declared your truth. We have testified that what you have brought is the truth from Allah. We have given you our pledges and covenants to hear and obey you. So proceed where you wish with the blessing of Allah. By Allah, if you were to take us across this sea and plunge into it, we would plunge in with you, not one man among us would stay behind." Sa'd continued, his voice rising with passion. "We do not dislike meeting our enemy tomorrow. We are experienced in war, trustworthy in combat. Perhaps Allah will show you from us that which will cool your eyes. So march with us with the blessing of Allah." The Prophet's face radiated joy. Tears glistened in his eyes. "March forward and rejoice," he proclaimed. "For Allah has promised me one of the two groups. And by Allah, it is as if I can see right now the places where these people will be killed tomorrow." This last statement puzzled many. What did he mean? They were going after a caravan guarded by 40 men. What people would be killed? Where? Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad, a fierce warrior, stood and added his voice. "O Messenger of Allah, we will not say what the people of Moses said. March where you wish and we will march with you, before you, behind you, to your right and to your left. By the one who sent you with the truth, if you led us to Bark al-Gimad, the farthest known place, we would follow you." The mood had shifted completely. What began as an uncertain consultation had become a unified declaration of absolute commitment. The preparation. The Muslims began preparing immediately. But the reality was sobering. Only 313 believers would march out. They had only 2 horses and the entire 470 camels had to be shared among them. 3 or 4 men taking turns riding each camel. Many had no armor, only simple garments. Some carried only sticks or staffs as weapons. Most were fasting. As it was the month of Ramadan, they had minimal provisions for the journey. The Ansar formed the majority, about 230 men. The Muhajirin from Mecca numbered around 83. These were not professional soldiers. They were merchants, craftsmen, farmers and freed slaves. Many had never seen real combat. But what they lacked in military experience they possessed in abundance of something far more powerful. Absolute certainty that they were fighting for truth. The Prophet appointed Abdullah ibn Maktum, a blind companion, to lead prayers in Medina during their absence. He left Ali ibn Abi Talib briefly to handle some family affairs before joining them. As they prepared to march, one young man approached the Prophet with tears in his eyes. "O Messenger of Allah," he said, "I wish to go with you but my mother forbids me and I cannot disobey her." The Prophet smiled gently. "Then obey your mother. Paradise lies at the feet of mothers." The young man stayed behind, heartbroken, not knowing that those who would march to Badr would earn a status in paradise reserved for the greatest believers. The small army set out from Medina heading southwest toward Badr. They walked during the cool nights and rested during the scorching days. Men took turns on the camels, walking for hours in the sand, their feet burning, their throats parched, their bodies exhausted. The Prophet himself shared a camel with Ali ibn Abi Talib and Marthad ibn Abi Marthad. When it was the Prophet's turn to walk, his companions insisted, "We will walk for you, O Messenger of Allah." He refused. "You are no stronger than I am to endure difficulty, and I am no less in need of reward than you are." As they marched under the star-filled Arabian sky, the reality of what they were about to face began to sink in. They were 300 men with minimal equipment, marching to confront, what? A caravan? An army? Both? They didn't know. All they knew was that their Prophet had called and they had answered. One companion later described his thoughts during that march. "I was terrified. But more than fear I felt something else, a certainty that we were doing the right thing, that Allah was with us. I looked at the Prophet walking beside us, calm and smiling, and my fear melted away. If he wasn't afraid, why should I be?" Moral reflection. True leadership seeks counsel, not just obedience. The Prophet could have commanded and been followed. Instead he asked for hearts, not just bodies. And when the Ansar pledged to plunge into the sea if needed, they weren't speaking poetically, they meant every word. This is the foundation of faith, not forced compliance but voluntary surrender to truth. The journey to Badr was a test of endurance that would have broken lesser men. For 2 days and nights, the small Muslim army traversed the harsh Arabian desert. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, turning the sand into a furnace. At night, the temperature plummeted, leaving men shivering in their thin garments. They were fasting, it was Ramadan. Their lips cracked from thirst. Their stomachs cramped from hunger. Their feet blistered from walking barefoot across burning sand and sharp rocks. The shared burden. With only 70 camels for 313 men, the arrangements were both practical and symbolic. Every 3 or 4 men shared a single camel, taking turns riding and walking. Abu Lubaba later narrated, "I shared a camel with the Messenger of Allah and another companion. When it came time for the Messenger to walk, we said, 'O Messenger of Allah, we will walk for you. Rest.' He replied, 'You are not stronger than me, nor am I less in need of reward than you.'" This simple act, the Prophet walking alongside the poorest believers, refusing special treatment, forged a bond that would prove unbreakable in battle. Ali ibn Abi Talib described the march. "We would walk for hours until our legs felt like they would collapse. Then we'd ride for a short while, barely enough to catch our breath before walking again. Some men's feet bled, leaving traces on the sand. But no one complained. How could we? The Prophet was enduring the same hardship. The Prophet's calmness. What struck the companions most was the Prophet's demeanor. While everyone else showed signs of anxiety and exhaustion, he remained serene, smiling, encouraging them with gentle words. He would say, "Paradise is under the shade of swords. And, by the one in whose hand is my soul, any man who fights them today with patience and seeking reward, advancing and not retreating, Allah will enter him into paradise." One night, as they camped under the stars, a young companion approached the Prophet. "O Messenger of Allah," he asked quietly, "are you afraid of what we're marching toward?" The Prophet looked at him with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible world. "I am not afraid, for Allah has shown me their defeat. I can see, as clearly as I see you now, where each of our enemies will fall tomorrow." The young man's eyes widened. "You've seen this?" "Yes," the Prophet confirmed. "Allah has revealed to me the outcome. We march not in uncertainty but in certainty." Strategic movement. The Prophet sent scouts ahead, Basir ibn Abi Basir and Adi ibn Abi al-Zaba, to gather intelligence about the enemy's position and movements. The scouts reached the area near Badr and observed both the Quraysh army and movements of Abu Sufyan's caravan. They captured 2 young water carriers from the Quraysh camp and brought them back for questioning. The water carriers, terrified, revealed crucial information. The Quraysh army is huge, between 900 and 1,000 men. They have horses, armor, and are confident of victory. Some companions felt their hearts sink. They had expected to intercept a caravan, not face a full army 3 times their size. But the Prophet smiled. Good news? This is what Allah has promised us. Reaching Badr first. The Muslims arrived at Badr ahead of the Quraysh, a significant tactical advantage. Badr was a small valley with several wells scattered across it. Whoever controlled the water controlled the battlefield. In the desert, water is life itself. The Prophet initially camped at a certain location, but then Al-Hubab ibn al-Mundhir, a wise companion experienced in desert warfare, approached him respectfully. "O Messenger of Allah," Al-Hubab asked, "is this camping position something Allah has revealed to you, in which case we cannot move from it, or is it strategy, war tactics, and planning?" "It is strategy and planning," the Prophet replied. "O Messenger of Allah," Al-Hubab continued, "then this is not the ideal position. The best position would be at the well nearest to the enemy. We should camp there, fill that well for our use, and fill in all the other wells so the enemy has no access to water." The Prophet's face lit up with joy. Excellent counsel. This interaction reveals something beautiful about Islamic leadership. The Prophet distinguished between matters of revelation, which cannot be questioned, and matters of worldly strategy, where expertise and consultation are welcome. The plan was implemented immediately. The Muslims repositioned to the well nearest the Quraysh approach. They filled leather containers with water for their own use, then filled the other wells with sand and stones, denying the enemy access. Building the command post. The companions built a simple shelter, a hut made of palm fronds, for the Prophet to use as a command post during the battle. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh stationed himself at the entrance with his sword drawn, vowing to protect the Prophet with his life. As they worked, the Prophet walked across the battlefield, stopping at specific locations. To the astonishment of his companions, he would point to a spot and say, "This is where so-and-so will be killed tomorrow if Allah wills. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah will fall here. Shaybah ibn Rabi'ah will die at this spot. Abu Jahl will be killed right here." The companions marked these spots with stones, their hearts filled with awe and confusion. How could the Prophet know these things? The battle hadn't even begun. But they had learned to trust his words, even when they couldn't understand them. The final preparations. As the sun began to set on the 16th of Ramadan, the Muslims completed their preparations. They had secured the water supply, chosen the best defensive position, marked the battlefield, built a command shelter, arranged their minimal weapons and equipment. What they didn't have: numerical superiority, superior weapons, cavalry advantage, military experience, adequate armor. One companion later described that evening, "We sat in small groups, talking in low voices. Some sharpened their few weapons. Others prayed. Many simply sat in silence, contemplating what tomorrow would bring. We could see the campfires of the Quraysh in the distance, so many fires indicating a massive army. And here we were, barely 300 men, most of us hungry, exhausted, poorly armed. By any logical calculation we should have been terrified. But strangely we felt calm. Not the calm of ignorance, but the calm of certainty. We knew we were about to witness something extraordinary. The enemy arrives." As darkness fell, the Quraysh army arrived from the opposite direction and made camp on the far side of the valley. Their campfires lit up the night sky. Their war drums thundered across the valley. Their warriors boasted loudly of the slaughter they would inflict tomorrow. They had brought musicians and singing women to celebrate their expected victory. From the Muslim side, the believers could hear the enemy's festivities, the sounds of confidence, pride, and power. Abu Jahl's voice could be heard above the rest. "Tomorrow we will make an example of these rebels that all Arabia will remember forever." The contrast couldn't have been starker. On one side, a massive, well-equipped army celebrating their imminent victory. On the other, a small band of believers, exhausted and outmatched, preparing their souls for whatever Allah had decreed. One young companion, barely 16 years old, later recalled, "I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on the cold sand, looking up at the stars, listening to the enemy's drums and our own whispered prayers. I thought about my mother back in Medina, wondering if I'd ever see her again. I thought about paradise, trying to imagine what it would be like. Mostly I prayed. I prayed for courage. I prayed for strength. I prayed that Allah would help us, even though by every worldly measure, we had no chance of survival. Moral reflection. Faith is not tested in comfort, but in the desert of fear. As the Muslims marched toward their destiny, they had every reason to turn back. They were outnumbered, outarmed, exhausted, and fasting. But they marched forward because they had learned a truth that transforms everything. When you walk toward what Allah commands, you don't walk alone. The steps you take in fear become the pathway to miracles. As the night deepened over the valley of Badr, something extraordinary began to happen. The sky, which had been clear and star-filled, suddenly began to gather clouds. Within minutes, rain started to fall, a gentle, unexpected rain in a season when rain was virtually unheard of. But this was no ordinary rain. For the Muslims, the rain was cool and refreshing. It washed away the dust and grime of their journey. It soothed their parched throats. Most miraculously, it settled the sand beneath their feet, turning it firm and easy to walk on, perfect footing for battle. The believers gathered the precious water, drinking their fill, performing ablution, feeling their strength renewed. But on the Quraysh side of the valley, the same rain had a completely different effect. The ground there turned muddy and treacherous. Their horses slipped and struggled. Their heavy armor became a burden as they sank into the softening earth. The Quran itself would later describe this miracle. Remember, when He overwhelmed you with drowsiness, giving you security from Him, and sent down upon you rain from the sky to purify you and remove from you the evil suggestions of Satan and to strengthen your hearts and plant firmly your feet. Quran 8:11. Then came the second miracle. An overwhelming drowsiness fell upon the Muslim camp. Despite the anxiety of facing battle, despite the cold of the night, despite the proximity of 1,000 enemies, the believers fell into deep, peaceful sleep. This wasn't natural sleep. It was a divine gift, a few hours of complete rest that refreshed their bodies and calmed their hearts. When they would wake, they would feel as if they had slept for days, their exhaustion completely washed away. Companions would later describe it. It was the most peaceful sleep of my life. I had no dreams, no nightmares, no anxiety. Just pure, restorative rest. When I woke, I felt ready for anything. The Prophet's night of prayer. But there was one man who did not sleep that night. In his simple shelter, the Prophet Muhammad spent the entire night in prayer. Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, who had positioned himself near the entrance to guard his beloved friend, watched through the gaps in the palm fronds. What he witnessed would bring tears to his eyes for the rest of his life. The Prophet stood in prayer, his hands raised toward heaven, his face turned upward, tears streaming down his blessed cheeks. His whispered prayers could be heard by those nearest to him. O Allah! Here come the Quraysh with their vanity and pride, trying to discredit your messenger. Allah! Grant me your victory which you have promised me. He prostrated, his forehead touching the earth, and Abu Bakr heard him say, O Allah! If this small group is destroyed today, you will not be worshipped on earth. The Prophet raised his hands again, and his voice became more urgent. O Allah! Fulfill your promise to me. Allah! If you wish, you will never be worshipped after today. He repeated these prayers over and over, his voice breaking with emotion, his tears soaking the prayer mat beneath him. Abu Bakr, witnessing this, couldn't contain himself. He entered the shelter and gently placed his hand on the Prophet's shoulder. O Messenger of Allah, Abu Bakr said softly, his own voice thick with emotion, you have called upon your Lord enough. He will surely fulfill what he has promised you. The Prophet looked at Abu Bakr, and despite the tears on his face, there was a light in his eyes, a certainty beyond description. Do not grieve, Abu Bakr, the Prophet said. Indeed, Allah is with us. Then the Prophet lay down for just a moment, not to sleep but to rest briefly before dawn. As he rested, something happened that Abu Bakr would describe with awe for years afterward. The Prophet smiled in his rest, a beautiful, radiant smile. Then he sat up suddenly, his face glowing with joy. Rejoice, Abu Bakr, he exclaimed. Allah's help has come. Here is Gabriel, holding the reins of a horse covered in dust. Abu Bakr looked around the shelter but could see nothing except the pre-dawn darkness and the gentle rain outside. But he believed. He had always believed. The Prophet emerged from his shelter just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. His face was serene, filled with absolute certainty. He walked among his sleeping companions, gently waking them. Wake up, believers, he said softly. Dawn is breaking and Allah's promise is about to be fulfilled. The companions woke feeling miraculously refreshed. The exhaustion of their journey had vanished. Their fears had melted away during that divinely ordained sleep. They rose with strength they shouldn't have had, with courage that defied their circumstances. As they performed the far prayer together, standing in rows behind the prophet, there was a palpable sense that something momentous was about to occur. One companion described his feelings at that moment. When I woke that morning, I felt different. The fear I had carried since leaving Medina was gone. I looked at my brothers standing for prayer and I knew, somehow I just knew, that we were not alone. I couldn't see the angels but I could feel their presence. It was like standing in the middle of an invisible army. Moral reflection. The night before Badr teaches us that divine help comes to those who exhaust their own efforts first. The prophet had consulted his companions, marched through the desert, secured the water supply, positioned his forces strategically, and only then did he spend the night in prayer, asking for what human effort alone could never achieve. This is the balance. Work with your hands, then raise them in prayer. Plan with your mind, then surrender the outcome to your Lord. On the opposite side of the valley, the Quraysh camp was a scene of contrasting emotions. Most of the warriors were filled with confidence bordering on arrogance. They had marched from Mecca as a massive, well-equipped army. They outnumbered the Muslims 3-1. They had superior cavalry, better weapons and professional warriors. Abu Jahl strode through the camp, rallying the men. Tomorrow we will feast on the blood of these rebels. We will show all of Arabia what happens to those who challenge Quraysh. But not everyone shared his enthusiasm. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, one of the most experienced warriors and chiefs of Quraysh, sat by his fire with a troubled expression. He was a seasoned veteran who had seen many battles, and something about this situation disturbed him deeply. As dawn approached, Utbah called for the chiefs to gather. His voice carried the weight of his years and experience. "O people of Quraysh! By Allah, I see a situation that worries me. You are about to fight Muhammad and his companions, men who have nothing to lose. If you kill them, you will have killed your own sons, your brothers, your cousins. For the rest of your lives, you will see in each other's faces the one who killed your loved one." He continued, "I see men who are willing to die. A man who is not afraid of death is dangerous, regardless of his numbers. I propose we turn back. Let me bear the responsibility and the shame. The caravan is safe. Abu Sufyan has taken the coastal route. There is no reason to fight." Some chiefs nodded in agreement. The wisdom in Utbah's words was undeniable. But then Abu Jahl heard about Utbah's speech, and his face twisted with rage. Abu Jahl confronted Utbah publicly. "Your belly has become full, and your courage has left you. What is this cowardice, Utbah? Has your heart become weak?" Then Abu Jahl did something calculated to ensure the battle would happen. He found Amir ibn al-Hadrami, whose brother had been killed in a previous skirmish with the Muslims. Abu Jahl said to him, "This is your brother's killer right there across the valley, and here is Utbah telling us to go home and leave your brother's blood unavenged." Amir, consumed with grief and rage, tore off his clothes and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Oh, my brother! My brother's blood must be avenged." This public display made retreat impossible. Arab honor culture now demanded blood. Utbah, seeing that battle was inevitable, approached his brother Shaybah and his son al-Walid. His voice was heavy with foreboding. "My brothers, I tried to prevent this. But now that we must fight, we will fight with honor. We are men of Quraysh. Whatever happens today, we will face it with dignity." Another voice of reason came from Hakim ibn Hizam, who approached his uncle with a desperate plea. "Uncle, we can still turn back. This battle serves no purpose now that the caravan is safe." But by this point, the momentum toward battle was unstoppable. Pride, honor, blood debt, and Abu Jahl's manipulation had sealed their fate. The arrogance. As the Quraysh army began arranging itself for battle, their confidence was palpable and dangerous. They looked across the valley at the small Muslim force and saw barely 300 men, 2 horses compared to their 300 minimal armor, simple weapons, men who were exhausted from fasting and traveling. Some Quraysh warriors mocked openly, "Look at these beggars. This won't even be a battle, it will be a slaughter." Another called out, "We'll be done before breakfast and feast by noon." Abu Jahl himself declared, "By Al-Lat and Al-Uzza, after today, no one will dare mention the name of Muhammad in Arabia again." They arranged themselves in traditional battle formation, a massive crescent shape designed to envelope and crush the enemy. Their horses pranced at the flanks. Their banners flew high. The morning sun glinted off their armor and weapons. It was an intimidating, magnificent sight, the full military might of Arabia's most powerful city, arranged in perfect order, ready to destroy the upstart Muslims once and for all. The Muslim response. On the Muslim side, the response to seeing this massive army was completely different. There was no panic, no chaos, no despair. The Prophet arranged his small force in tight ranks. He walked along the line with an arrow in his hand, using it to straighten the rows, ensuring perfect alignment. When one companion, Sawad ibn Ghaziyah, stood slightly out of line, the Prophet gently poked him with the arrow to adjust his position. Sawad immediately said, "O Messenger of Allah, you have hurt me. Allah sent you with justice and truth. I demand retaliation." The Prophet, without hesitation, handed him the arrow and exposed his own stomach. "Take your retaliation." Sawad immediately embraced the Prophet and kissed his stomach, tears streaming down his face. "What made you do this, Sawad?" the Prophet asked gently. "O Messenger of Allah," Sawad replied, "you see what is before us. I wanted the last thing I did in this world to be placing my skin against yours." The Prophet prayed for him, "May Allah bless you, Sawad." This incident encapsulates the Muslim mindset at Badr. They weren't preparing for battle with bravado or false courage. They were preparing to meet Allah, and their final acts were those of love and devotion. The Prophet addressed his small army one final time before the battle. "Be steadfast. Victory is near. Paradise is under the shade of swords. By the one in whose hand is my soul, any man who fights them today with patience, seeking reward, advancing and not retreating, Allah will enter him into paradise." Umar ibn al-Humam, who had been eating some dates, suddenly threw them away and exclaimed, "Bak! Bak! Wonderful! Wonderful! Is there nothing between me and paradise except to be killed by these people?" He drew his sword and plunged into battle without waiting for the official start, fighting until he was martyred. The contrast. The scene was set. On one side, a massive army drunk with pride, confident of easy victory, motivated by honor and revenge. On the other side, a small band of believers united in faith, motivated by love of Allah and His Messenger, standing firm despite impossible odds. One side saw the battle as a means to cement their worldly power and prestige. The other side saw it as a doorway to paradise. As the sun rose fully over the valley of Badr on the 17th of Ramadan in the second year of Hijrah, both armies stood facing each other across the sand. The Quraysh saw victory. The Muslims saw their destiny. And in the heavens above, invisible to human eyes but recorded in divine decree, 5,000 angels prepared to descend and write history. Moral reflection. Pride blinds while humility clarifies. The Quraysh saw numbers, weapons and armor, and believed these guaranteed victory. The Muslims saw their weaknesses clearly, yet chose to stand firm anyway, trusting not in their own strength but in Allah's promise. Abu Jahl's arrogance and Utbah's ignored wisdom show us that the loudest voice in the room is not always the wisest. Sometimes the path to destruction is paved with pride, honor, and the refusal to retreat from a position that wisdom says should be abandoned. The sun climbed slowly over the eastern horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The valley of Badr lay between two armies, the space between them charged with tension so thick it seemed physical. This was the moment history had been building toward. The Prophet Muhammad walked along the front line of his small army one final time. In his hand he held an arrow, not to shoot, but to use as a measuring tool for arranging the ranks. "Straighten your rows," he instructed calmly. "Stand shoulder to shoulder. Fill the gaps. Align yourselves as if you are a solid wall." He moved methodically, using the arrow to gently tap anyone out of alignment. When he reached a companion standing slightly forward, he touched him gently to move him back. Every movement was deliberate, precise, calm. There was no panic in the Prophet's demeanor, no urgency born of fear. He arranged his men as if preparing for prayer, not battle. One companion later recalled, "His calmness was contagious. When I saw him walking so peacefully, so deliberately, I thought, if he is not afraid, why should I be? He sees what we cannot see. He knows what we do not know." The final instructions. When the ranks were perfectly aligned, the Prophet addressed them. "Do not initiate the fighting. Wait until they come close. When they are near enough that you cannot miss, then strike. And conserve your arrows, use them only when necessary." Then he added something that sent shivers through every heart. "I swear by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, any man who fights them today with patience and seeking reward, advancing and not retreating, Allah will enter him into paradise." This was not a metaphor. This was not encouragement. This was a promise. The challenge of single combat. According to ancient Arabian tradition, major battles often began with individual duels between champions. These duels were matters of immense honor and often determined the morale of both armies. From the Quraysh ranks, 3 figures stepped forward into the empty space between the armies. These were not ordinary warriors, they were the nobility of Makkah. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, a veteran warrior, wealthy and respected, one of the chiefs of Quraysh. Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, Utbah's brother, equally skilled and experienced. Walid ibn Utbah, son of Utbah, young but trained in combat from childhood. They stood in the center of the battlefield, their armor gleaming in the morning sun, their swords drawn. Utbah's voice boomed across the valley. Who will duel us? Send forth our equals. 3 young men from the Ansar, the Muslims of Medina, stepped forward immediately, eager to fight for their faith. But Utbah's response was cutting and dismissive. Return. We have no need of you. We want our equals, our own people from Quraysh. This was a calculated insult. Utbah was saying, we are nobility. We don't fight common people. Send us someone worthy of our swords. The Prophet understood the psychology at play. This wasn't just about combat, it was about honor, lineage, and the social order that Quraysh desperately wanted to maintain. He called out 3 names that would echo through history. Stand up, O Ubaidah ibn al-Harith. Stand up, O Hamza. Stand up, O Ali. The 3 men rose and walked forward. All 3 were from Banu Hashim, the Prophet's own clan. All 3 were connected by blood to the Quraysh nobility. This was nobility against nobility, clan against clan. Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the Prophet's uncle, a man of legendary strength and courage. He was about 50 years old, with muscles like iron and a reputation that preceded him. Even before Islam, Hamza had been known throughout Arabia as a warrior without equal. Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's young cousin, barely into his 20s. He was quick as lightning, skilled beyond his years and utterly fearless. His devotion to the Prophet was absolute. Ubaidah ibn al-Harith, an older, experienced warrior, cousin to the Prophet, known for his wisdom in battle and his steadfastness. The 3 Muslims stood before the 3 Quraysh champions. For a moment, the entire battlefield held its breath. Utbah looked at them and nodded with grim respect. These are our equals. Now we fight. The first duel, Hamza versus Shayba. Clashing. Hamza and Shayba faced each other. Shayba was experienced, but Hamza was a force of nature. They circled briefly, each measuring the other. Then Shayba struck first, a powerful downward slash meant to cleave through armor and bone. Hamza moved with surprising speed for a man of his size. He deflected the blow and countered with a strike of devastating power. Shayba fell, his life ended almost instantly. Hamza's superior strength and skill had prevailed in seconds. The second duel, Ali versus Al-Walid. Ali ibn Abi Talib faced Al-Walid, son of Utbah. Al-Walid was in his prime, trained by the best masters Makkah could provide. But Ali had been trained by something greater, absolute faith and divine destiny. They exchanged blows with incredible speed. Al-Walid was skilled, but Ali was inspired. Ali's sword moved like lightning. With precise strikes that seemed almost choreographed by the divine, he overwhelmed Al-Walid's defenses. Al-Walid collapsed into the sand, his blood staining the earth red. Ali stood over him briefly, then turned back toward the Muslim ranks. The third duel, Ubaidah versus Utbah. The duel between Ubaidah and Utbah was different. These were both veterans, both experienced in the art of combat. They knew that one mistake would be fatal. They circled, struck, parried, and countered. The exchange was longer, more brutal. Both men were landing blows. Then both struck simultaneously. Utbah's sword found Ubaidah's leg, cutting deep. Ubaidah's sword struck Utbah in the chest. Both men fell, grievously wounded. Seeing Ubaidah wounded, Hamza and Ali rushed to his aid. Together they struck down the already injured Utbah, ending his life. They then carried Ubaidah back to the Muslim lines. His wound was deep and would prove mortal. He would die from it days later. But in that moment he smiled through his pain. If Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle, could see me now, Ubaidah whispered, he would know I did not lie when I pledged to fight for his nephew. The impact of these duels on morale cannot be overstated. The Quraysh had sent forth their finest champions, men of noble lineage and proven skill. All 3 had been defeated, 2 killed instantly, 1 mortally wounded. The Muslims erupted in celebration, their voices raised in praise, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. But on the Quraysh side, shock rippled through the ranks. These were supposed to be easy victories, demonstrations of Quraysh superiority. Instead, they had been utterly humiliated. Abu Jahl, seeing the psychological damage, acted quickly. His face twisted with rage, he drew his sword and screamed, "Charge! Kill them all! Avenge our fallen!" The entire Quraysh army surged forward like a tidal wave of iron and fury. The Battle of Badr was about to begin in earnest. Moral reflection. The dawn at Badr teaches us that preparation meets opportunity at the moment of truth. The Prophet arranged his ranks with the precision of a master, ensuring every man stood in his proper place. Then came the duels, not random chaos but measured tests of courage where skill and faith combined. When Hamza, Ali and Ubaidah stepped forward, they weren't just representing themselves, they carried the hopes of an entire community. Their victory in single combat was the first crack in the wall of Quraysh invincibility. Sometimes, one man's courage at the right moment can shift the psychology of an entire war. The Quraysh army thundered across the valley floor like an avalanche of metal and muscle. Over 900 warriors, 300 mounted cavalry, the finest weapons money could buy, all focused on annihilating the small Muslim force. The earth itself seemed to shake under the weight of their charge. But the Muslims did not break. They did not flee. They stood shoulder to shoulder, exactly as the Prophet had arranged them, and they faced the storm. The descent of angels. What happened next would be recorded in the Quran itself and narrated in authentic hadiths for all time. As the Quraysh charged, the heavens opened. 5,000 angels descended upon the battlefield of Badr. The companions couldn't see them, not with physical eyes. But they could sense them. Some described it as a sudden confidence that flooded their hearts, washing away all fear. Others felt an inexplicable strength surge through their exhausted bodies. A few reported hearing sounds like horses' hooves and the whistling of unseen weapons. The Quran describes this moment. Remember, when you asked help from your Lord and he answered you, "Indeed, I will reinforce you with 1,000 angels following one another." And Allah made it only as glad tidings and so that your hearts would be at rest. And victory is not except from Allah. Quran 8:9-10. Ibn Abbas narrated what a Muslim warrior described. "I was chasing one of the polytheists to strike him, when I heard the crack of a whip above my head and the voice of a rider saying, 'Onward, Hazim,' the name of an angelic horse. I looked at the polytheist in front of me and he fell on his back. When I examined him, his nose was cut and his face was slashed as if struck by a whip. All of his face had turned green." The Prophet's supplication. Throughout the battle, the Prophet Muhammad remained in his palm frond shelter, his hands raised to the heavens in desperate prayer. Abu Bakr and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh stood guard outside, but they could hear the Prophet's cries. "O Allah! Fulfill your promise to me, Allah. If this group of believers is destroyed today, you will not be worshipped on earth." His cloak fell from his shoulders as he raised his hands higher and higher, pleading with his Lord. Abu Bakr, tears streaming down his face, finally entered and said gently, "O Messenger of Allah, your pleading to your Lord is sufficient. He will surely fulfill what he has promised you." The Prophet suddenly stopped, his face transformed with joy and certainty. He emerged from the shelter and picked up a handful of dust and pebbles. He faced the Quraysh army and threw the handful toward them, saying, "May their faces be disfigured." What happened next defied natural explanation. That small handful of dust, which could normally travel perhaps a few meters, somehow reached the eyes of every single Quraysh warrior simultaneously, regardless of where they stood on the battlefield. Over 900 men suddenly found their eyes filled with dust and pebbles, blinding them, causing panic. The Quran would later reveal, "And you did not kill them, but it was Allah who killed them. And you threw not when you threw, but it was Allah who threw." Quran 8:17. The turning point. The organized Quraysh assault dissolved into chaos. Warriors who couldn't see properly stumbled and fell. Horses panicked. The tight formation crumbled. And the Muslims, energized by forces they couldn't fully understand, pressed forward. Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib was a force of nature on the battlefield. His sword seemed to be everywhere at once. Quraysh nobles who had mocked the Muslims hours before now fled from Hamza's approach. One companion described him, "I saw Hamza cutting through the enemy like a farmer harvesting wheat. His strength was not human. Every swing of his sword felled an enemy. We followed in his wake, protected by his fury." Ali ibn Abi Talib fought with supernatural speed. His sword struck with precision that seemed divinely guided. Later, when bodies were collected, several Quraysh warriors would be found with wounds so clean and precise they could only have come from Ali's blade. The death of Abu Jahl, the pharaoh of this ummah. Among the Muslim fighters were two young men from the Ansar, Mu'adh ibn Ammar and Mu'awwid ibn Afra, barely teenagers. Both had sworn an oath, We will find Abu Jahl and kill him or die trying. Abu Jahl was the most vicious enemy of Islam, the man who had personally tortured Muslims, mocked the Prophet and sworn to destroy the message. Finding him in the chaos of battle seemed impossible. But they searched. They spotted him in the thick of battle, still fighting, still commanding, still defiant. The two young warriors attacked from different sides simultaneously. Both struck with their swords, powerful blows that cut deep into Abu Jahl's legs and torso. Abu Jahl fell, mortally wounded but still alive. The two young men left him there, believing him dead, and continued fighting. Later the Prophet sent Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, a small humble companion who had been too slight to fight in the front lines, to search for Abu Jahl among the dead and dying. Ibn Mas'ud found him, barely breathing, blood pooling around him. Abu Jahl's eyes opened, and even in death's grip, his arrogance remained. "Have you ever climbed a difficult mountain before, little shepherd?" Abu Jahl mocked, recognizing the man he had once tormented in Mecca. Ibn Mas'ud placed his foot on Abu Jahl's neck. "I have indeed climbed you today, O enemy of Allah." Abu Jahl's final words revealed the bitter reality of his defeat. "Tell me, who won the battle today?" "Allah and his messenger won," Ibn Mas'ud replied. Then he drew his sword and beheaded the man who had been called the Pharaoh of the Quraysh. When the head was brought to the Prophet, he said, "This is the Pharaoh of this Ummah." The encounter of Bilal and Umayyah. Perhaps no confrontation at Badr carried more emotional weight than what happened between Bilal and his former master, Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Years before, Umayyah had been Bilal's owner and torturer. He would drag Bilal to the scorching desert at noon, place a massive boulder on his chest, and leave him to suffer under the merciless sun, demanding he renounce Islam. Bilal, despite the unimaginable agony, would respond, "Ahad, Ahad, 1-1. Now, at Badr their positions were reversed. As the Quraysh army collapsed, Umayyah found himself trapped behind enemy lines. In desperation he grabbed hold of Abd al-Rahman ibn Awf, a Muslim who had been an acquaintance before Islam. "Please," Umayyah begged, "take me prisoner. I am worth more ransom than any soldier here. Protect me." Abd al-Rahman, moved by compassion and the prospect of a valuable prisoner, agreed. He began leading Umayyah and his son Ali through the battlefield toward the Muslim lines. Then Bilal saw them. Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Bilal's voice cut through the battle sounds. The head of disbelief. "May I not survive if he survives?" Abd al-Rahman pleaded, "Bilal, he is my prisoner. Please." But Bilal called to other Muslims. The head of disbelief, Umayyah ibn Khalaf. "May I not survive if he survives?" A group of Muslims surrounded them. Abd al-Rahman tried to shield Umayyah with his own body, but there were too many. In the chaos, Umayyah and his son were struck down. Abd al-Rahman later said with regret, "May Allah have mercy on Bilal, he deprived me of my two prisoners and lost me a great ransom." But for Bilal it was not about money. It was justice. The man who had tried to kill his faith, who had tortured him for believing in one God, had finally faced divine judgment on earth. The angels work. Throughout the battlefield, the angels worked in ways both visible and invisible. One companion narrated, "I struck at an enemy's head with my sword, but before my blade connected, his head flew off. I knew then that an angel had struck him first." Another said, "I saw men falling without anyone near them as if struck by invisible hands. I saw wounds appearing on enemies without any of us touching them." The terror in the hearts of the Quraysh was not just from the Muslim fighters, it was from the unseen army that fought alongside them. The proud Quraysh army, which had marched to Badr expecting to feast on Muslim blood, now fled in total panic. Warriors threw down their expensive weapons and armor, anything to run faster. The organized formation had become a stampede of terror. Abu Sufyan, who was not in the main battle but observing from a distance, later said, "I saw something that day I cannot explain. I saw our greatest warriors fall to smaller numbers. I saw men running in terror from an enemy they should have easily defeated. I knew then that Muhammad had help from sources beyond this world." The final push. The Muslims, sensing the complete collapse of enemy resistance, pressed their advantage. They pursued the fleeing Quraysh warriors, capturing those who surrendered and fighting those who resisted. The Prophet, watching from his command post, prostrated in gratitude. His face was wet with tears, but these were tears of joy and thankfulness, not sorrow. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the impossible had occurred. 300 Muslims had defeated over 900 Quraysh warriors. The greatest military force ever assembled by Mecca had been utterly destroyed. 70 Quraysh nobles lay dead in the sand, including Abu Jahl, Utbah, Shayba, al-Walid, Umayyah, and dozens of other chiefs and warriors. 70 more had been captured, including some of the highest-ranking nobles in Arabia. The Muslims had lost 14 martyrs, brave men who had earned paradise through their sacrifice. The prophecy fulfilled. As the fighting ended, the companions remembered something extraordinary. The day before the battle, the Prophet had walked across the valley, pointing to specific spots and saying, "So-and-so will die here. So-and-so will fall at this spot." They had marked these places with stones. Now, in the aftermath, they went to check. Abu Jahl, found dead at the exact spot the Prophet had indicated. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, his body lay precisely where predicted. Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, exactly in the marked location. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, in the spot designated for him. One after another, the bodies were found in the exact locations the Prophet had pointed to 24 hours before the battle. Not approximately. Not nearby. Exactly in those spots. One companion stood trembling, looking at the fulfilled prophecies. "We are witnessing miracles. We are part of something that will be spoken of until the day of judgment. How blessed are we to have stood on this battlefield." The Prophet at the pit. The bodies of the Quraysh leaders were gathered and placed in a large pit, a mass grave for those who had died in their disbelief. The Prophet Muhammad approached the edge of the pit and did something that moved his companions deeply. He began calling out to the dead by name. "O Utbah ibn Rabi'ah. O Shayba ibn Rabi'ah. O Umayyah ibn Khalaf. O Abu Jahl ibn Hisham. Have you found what your Lord promised to be true?" "I have found what my Lord promised me to be true." Umar ibn al-Khattab was disturbed. "O Messenger of Allah, how can you speak to dead bodies without souls?" The Prophet replied, "By the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, you are not more able to hear what I say than they are. But they cannot respond." The dead could hear him. In their graves they acknowledged the truth they had rejected in life. They knew now, with absolute certainty, that the message they had fought against was true. But that knowledge came too late. It was not the clash of swords that decided Badr, it was the weight of faith. When 300 men stood with absolute certainty in Allah's promise, 5,000 angels descended to fight alongside them. This teaches us that divine help is conditional. It comes to those who first exhaust their own efforts, who stand firm despite impossible odds, who choose faith over fear. The angels did not come before the Muslims marched to Badr. They did not come before the Muslims stood in ranks facing an army 3 times their size. They came when human courage had gone as far as it could go, and that's when the miraculous began. As the dust settled over the valley of Badr and the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the magnitude of what had occurred became clear. The count. The Muslims moved across the field, counting their fallen and the enemy's losses. Muslim martyrs. 14 believers had been granted the ultimate honor, death in the path of Allah. Among them was Ubaidah ibn al-Harith, who had been mortally wounded in the opening duels. His last words had been a smile and a whisper, "If Abu Talib could see me today, he would know I fulfilled my pledge." Quraysh dead. 70 nobles and warriors lay dead in the sand. Not common soldiers but the leadership of Meccan society, chiefs, wealthy merchants, experienced warriors. Almost every major family in Mecca had lost someone. Quraysh prisoners. 70 more had been captured, including some of the most high-ranking nobles in Arabia. These prisoners represented immense potential ransom. The numbers told an impossible story. Roughly 1/4 of the Muslim force had engaged and defeated an enemy 3 times their size, inflicting a 70-to-14 kill ratio. By any military standard, this was not just a victory, it was an annihilation. The treatment of prisoners. What happened next would define Islamic ethics in warfare for all time. The Prophet instructed his companions, "Treat the prisoners well." This was revolutionary. In pre-Islamic Arabia, prisoners of war were typically enslaved, tortured, or killed. But the Prophet established a different standard. The prisoners were given food and water, sometimes before the Muslims ate themselves. They were sheltered from the sun. Their wounds were treated. Those who were bound were tied with gentleness, not cruelty. Mustafa ibn Shimik, one of the prisoners, later said, "I was among captives from Quraysh. The Ansar who captured me would give me bread and dates for meals, while they ate only dates themselves. Whenever I felt embarrassed and tried to give the bread back, they refused and insisted I eat it." This was the instruction they had received from their Prophet. The consultation on prisoners. The Prophet called his senior companions to consult on what should be done with the 70 prisoners. This was unprecedented. They had never held so many high-value captives. Abu Bakr spoke first. "O Messenger of Allah, these are your people, your kinsmen, your tribe. Some of them may yet be guided to Islam. I suggest we accept ransom for them. The wealth will strengthen our community, and perhaps Allah will turn their hearts to faith." His voice carried mercy and hope, the qualities that defined Abu Bakr's character. Then Umar ibn al-Khattab stood, and his viewpoint was starkly different. "By Allah, O Messenger of Allah, I disagree. These are the heads of disbelief, the leaders who persecuted us, drove us from our homes and tried to kill you. They are the enemies of Allah. Give me my relative and I will strike off his head. Give Ali his relative to execute. Give Hamza his relative. Let them face the consequences of their opposition to Allah and His Messenger." The Prophet listened to both opinions carefully. His face showed inclination toward Abu Bakr's mercy. "Indeed, Allah softens some hearts until they are softer than milk," he said, looking at Abu Bakr. "And He hardens other hearts until they are harder than stone," he added, glancing at Umar with a slight smile. The decision. The Prophet chose mercy. The prisoners would be ransomed. Wealthy prisoners, 4,000 dirhams middle-class prisoners, negotiated amounts poor prisoners, could gain freedom by teaching 10 Muslim children to read and write. This last provision was extraordinary. In a single decision, the Prophet transformed enemies into educators, using even defeat as an opportunity for spreading literacy and knowledge. The divine correction. The next morning, Abu Bakr and Umar noticed something troubling. The Prophet emerged from his dwelling with tear-stained cheeks, looking distressed. "O Messenger of Allah," Umar asked urgently, "what makes you weep? Tell us, so we may weep with you or at least appear to weep." The Prophet revealed, "I weep for what was shown to me about your companions regarding taking the ransom. Punishment was presented to me closer than this tree." Allah had revealed verses. "It is not for a prophet to have captives of war, until he inflicts a massacre upon Allah's enemies in the land. You, who captured the prisoners, desire the commodities of this world, but Allah desires, for you, the hereafter. And Allah is exalted in might and wise." Quran 8 hours 67 minutes. Both Abu Bakr and Umar wept, fearing divine punishment for their counsel. The message was clear. Mercy is beautiful, but in matters of war against those actively fighting Allah's religion, strength and decisive action are sometimes necessary. The Muslims had been too eager for ransom money, too quick to show mercy to enemies who had shown them none. However, Allah in His infinite mercy, allowed the decision to stand. The prisoners were ransomed as planned, but the lesson was learned. Victory requires both mercy and strength, applied with wisdom. Special cases among the prisoners. Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. Among the prisoners was Al-Abbas, the Prophet's own uncle. Though he had fought with the Quraysh, he claimed he had been forced to participate. "Pay your ransom like the others," the Prophet instructed. "But I am your uncle." Al-Abbas protested. "You are my uncle by blood," the Prophet replied firmly, "but you stood with those who fought against Allah and His Messenger. Justice does not bend for family ties." This demonstrated a crucial Islamic principle. Even the Prophet's family received no special treatment under Islamic law. Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi. One of the most emotionally powerful moments involved Abu al-As, husband of the Prophet's daughter Zainab, who had remained in Mecca. When the ransom negotiations began, a package arrived from Mecca for Abu al-Az's ransom. When it was opened, it contained a necklace. The Prophet recognized it immediately. It was the same necklace Khadija, his beloved late wife, had given to their daughter Zainab on her wedding day. Tears filled the Prophet's eyes. This necklace was one of the few remaining physical connections to Khadija, the woman who had supported him through the hardest years of persecution, who had believed in him when few others did. "If you see fit," he said to his companions, his voice breaking, "release her prisoner and return her property to her." The companions agreed immediately, moved by their Prophet's emotion. Abu al-As was released on the condition that he allow Zainab to migrate to Medina, which he honorably fulfilled, though it would be years before he himself accepted Islam and reunited with his wife. In the days following Badr, revelation came addressing the battle. "Allah has certainly given you victory at Badr when you were weak. So fear Allah, perhaps you will be grateful." Quran 3:123. "Already there has been for you a sign in the two armies which met, one fighting in the cause of Allah and another of disbelievers. They saw them to be twice their own number by their eyesight. But Allah supports with His victory whom He wills. Indeed, in that is a lesson for those of vision." Quran 3:13. The entire Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8, was revealed, providing divine commentary on the battle, its causes, its conduct, and its lessons. These verses transformed Badr from a historical event into a theological lesson, proving that Allah's promises are real, His support is tangible, and victory comes not from numbers but from faith. Moral reflection. The aftermath of Badr teaches us that even in victory, believers must remain humble and just. The Prophet showed mercy to prisoners, revolutionary in that time. He consulted his companions even when he could have simply commanded. He enforced justice even against his own uncle. And when Allah corrected their decision about the prisoners, they accepted the correction with tears and humility. True victory is not just defeating your enemy, it's maintaining your principles during and after the conflict. Stopwatch minute 55 to 60 reflection and outro. As we reach the end of this 60-minute journey through the Battle of Badr, let us step back and reflect on what this miraculous day means, not just for history but for every believer who will ever face impossible odds. What Badr teaches us. Badr was not about numbers. 313 men stood against over 900. By every worldly calculation they should have been annihilated. Their families should have been enslaved. The message of Islam should have ended in that desert valley. But that's not what happened. Because Badr was about sincerity. When Sa'd ibn Mu'adh said, "If you take us to the sea and plunge into it, we will plunge with you," he wasn't speaking poetically. He meant every word. That level of commitment, that depth of faith, changes everything. When Umar ibn al-Humam threw away his dates and rushed into battle saying, "Is there nothing between me and paradise except to be killed by these people?" He had discovered the secret that transforms fear into power. The secret of Badr. The secret of Badr is this: when humans exhaust their strength in Allah's cause, His strength takes over. The Muslims didn't sit in Medina waiting for angels to fight their battles. They marched through the desert. They positioned themselves strategically. They controlled the water supply. They stood in ranks despite their fear. They did everything within human power. And then, only then, did the angels descend. Divine help is not a replacement for human effort. It's the reward for it. The universal lesson. You might be facing your own Badr right now. Maybe it's not a battlefield. Maybe it's a disease that seems unconquerable, a financial crisis that feels insurmountable, a relationship that appears irreparable, an injustice that seems too powerful to challenge, a goal that looks impossible to achieve. The odds are against you. You're outnumbered, outmatched, overwhelmed. But remember Badr. Remember that 300 faced 1,001. Remember that slaves and outcasts defeated the nobility of Arabia. Remember that men with sticks and shared camels overcame warriors with 300 horses and full armor. Remember that when the Prophet threw that handful of dust, it reached the eyes of an entire army. Remember, you threw not when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. Quran 8:17.